The topic of the panel discussion this afternoon is about uh, the synergies between India and UAE, the complementary jurisdiction. The topic is vast, so I will quickly try to make it narrow so that the discussion is useful and fruitful for the next 30 minutes. On the back of the G20 summit that India hosted in New Delhi, there are several announcements that have been made which indicate towards the synergy and the active partnership between the Middle East and India. But for today's discussion, let's focus on the investment world, which is clearly an area of interest for our audience. And the moment we start talking about investment world and a comparison and synergies, we must quickly start looking at the two international financial services centers that we now have. DIFC with a time-tested record in Dubai, and Gujarat International Finance Tech City, which is the gift city in Gandhinagar in India. So I'll make this as a context for the next 30 minutes and start by inviting Mr. Dipesh Shah to give his opening remarks, who is the Executive Director and Head of Business Development at IFSCA in Gandhinagar. Dipesh, over to you, please.
Vinit, are you able to hear me?
We can hear you now.
To this G20 meeting, we could not physically be able to attend. And I'm glad that we are able to speak today through this virtual mode to all of you. In terms of synergy, I think, as rightly pointed out by Vinit, I think there are participants from the DIFC and the EDGM also present, and I acknowledge my fellow regulators' presence and my fellow development personals present in this conference. I think the synergy that the financial centers today brings on table for the various institutions to structure is enormous. And at a time when India has opened up its own offshore financial center, I'm sure a lot of strategies and the funds are evaluating the value of connecting the financial centers and the models which have become successful globally for investing into India. What we are seeing and we are witnessing is the emergence of the fund management entity regulations in the GIFT City, in the International Financial Center, has thrown up a tremendous opportunities for hedge funds. As I speak, close to 75 80 funds we have already approved in the International Financial Services Center in last 15 months. And for the benefit of the participants, at least 50% of them are long-only funds, which means that, in a way, really categorize them. They are part of the hedge funds community in the way that they are operating their strategies from the financial center here. We've got close to around $17-18 billion of commitment to invest into Indian equities and to invest into global equities from the International Financial Services Center. And at a time when India is opening up and is showing the greatest opportunity for investment in the Indian equity and the Indian growth story, I'm sure the hedge funds today, when sitting in UAE in this conference, are also trying to understand what are the new avenues to which they can, in a much, captive way, utilize the financial center to their advantage. And I'm sure the International Financial Services Center, which is an initiative of the Government of India, is on the same principle that how do I give an easy access investors to the GIFT City to invest not only in India but to the global markets. And we already have a cooperation with the DIFC and the EDGM regulator as a part of the memorandum of understanding with both the regulators, which can also be utilized by several market participants to see how can they effectively, if you are part of DIFC or EDGM, how can you also become part of the community at the GIFT City? We're very happy to facilitate the discussions around how this is but I'm sure when this will eventually go into a panel discussions, my fellow panelists will give you a much more deeper ideas around what are the strategies from a legal and from the tech side which are working for the participants in the international zone. I'll stop my initial remarks here, but we'll be happy to take the questions as the panel progresses.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Nimesh. Let me come to you, Dr. Bhaskar. Uh, DIFC has been around for quite a many number of years in terms of the framework, and we had seen the first round of interest, and there is a re-emergence of interest as far as DIFC is concerned. But let me ask you by finding out, what do you think is the reason for excitement around Gift City? Do you really think it's a game changer?
I hope you can hear me. Dipesh was mentioning about the MOU between Gift City and ADGM, which I'm going to claim a little bit of influence on that. But let's put it in this way, in terms of the trade and investment corridors, the link between India and the UAE is extremely strong. And of course, as Dipesh was talking about, the G20 piece is actually going to supercharge it, because at the end of the day, better trade means more investments. But let me just focus on the Gift City piece as well. And speaking as an ex-regulator, and of course now almost like a gamekeeper turned poacher, if you will. Just last week, I was in Gift City, and one of my firms has incorporated a fund management company over there, and the feeder vehicle will be based in the UAE. So putting it another way, most probably this is going to be the first operationalization of the MOU that we talked about. So let me try and explain why I'm putting literally my money where my mouth is, or in this particular case, the MOU. Let's face it, right now, the number one investment destination globally is India. And the most common aspects that people complain about India, that was the FX rate, the depreciation, is no longer there. Prime Minister Modi has said that he looks to stabilize the Indian rupee. So right now, given the interest rate scenario in the US, the current scenario of investments in India is absolutely amazing. But why gift? Again, let's be honest. You cannot actually just ignore the presence of offshore centers globally. The world has them, you can't wish them away. So if you are trying to attract capital or create an international financial center, then you have to treat it as an offshore center. You have to have that particular offshore center in your country. We talked about ADGM. We talked about DIFC. We've got Singapore. We've got Hong Kong. So the reason for setting up the Gift City is absolutely economically and from a competitive perspective, absolutely vital. This immediately takes away the most common objection that is made that, oh, we don't want to go onshore. But now it has leveled the playing field. That's number one. The second thing that you're talking about is that it has got literally competition between regulators. And I know this might not be very political to say this, but you do need this. It makes the process much more efficient. You can right now go to Gift City, and I'm sure Dipesh will not disagree, but in a matter of weeks you can get approval. And when you're talking about financial institutions going in there and having the ability to set up that fast, it's mind-boggling. So in terms of India having an offshore center in the form of GIFT is mind-blowing. But take a look at it from a longer-term perspective. Traditionally, you only thought that India is going to be a capital-constrained country. But I keep on saying we need to be much more ambitious. India, with its breadth and depth of investment opportunities, financial infrastructure, the tech stack that we're talking about, the payment stack that we're talking about, can very well become the hub for emerging market finance. If you're talking about emerging market finance, trade, funds, why do you have to go to London? You can very easily go to India and actually have the same quality of fund mobilization, people, etc., etc. So you have to lay in the corridors, and that's how the benefit between the UAE and India will work out. So I'm an extremely big supporter of GIFT.
coming to you, Krishna, and to draw your own experience as Alpine Capital, you have seen enough activity between UAE and India on variety of aspects, whether it is investments, whether it is M&A, fundraise, etc. Why don't you share your experiences and how you think this could perhaps change, either on account of gift or even otherwise?
Thank you. Very good afternoon, everybody. So let me start by saying that the relationship between India and UAE, or India and GCC, has matured beyond trade, primarily when countries are realizing the benefit of these strategic partnerships that underlie them. Trade between India and UAE, for example, has grown from a couple of $100 billion in 1970s to over $60 billion pre-COVID, and is expected to increase to more than $100 billion by the end of this decade. Both UAE and India are looking at FDIs to UAE is looking at FDI in terms of diversifying its economy, and India is looking at FDI towards its infrastructure development and other economic development plans. And where UAE has created a lot of free zones, FDI relaxations, India, while it is looking at all of this, as Dr. Bhaskar said, India has created, I think, a very robust digital framework which is now being used in multiple areas, from government, administration to commercial as well as consumer. And we are seeing a lot of activity and interest, not only from global investors but also from investors from within the region. In the last few years, we've raised almost $250 million of capital into India within financial institutions and corporates. More interestingly, we are seeing a lot of interest from Indian businesses to expand globally, both within the region in UAE and the GCC, as well as globally. And I think, if I may say, the interest levels that we are seeing today for businesses from India to expand globally are probably the highest that we've seen in the last decade.
Thank you, Krishna. Richie, coming to you, just your opening remarks on this discussion.
And thank you, Vinny, for having me here. Thanks to the organizers for putting together such a wonderful platform. I think, as a matter of brief background, let me just lay it out that we, as Richie City Associates, act as legal advisors to several intermediaries in the financial services industry. We also advise limited partners and investors who are looking to allocate to India-focused funds or regional allocation funds, where India is a key corpus. The reason I'm giving you this background is it will give you the perspective from where some of my insights are coming from. So to begin with, from an opening remarks perspective, Singapore ranks second in ease of doing business. Dubai is also part of the top 20 jurisdictions out there, while India has been ranking significantly much lower from an ease of doing business perspective. But in this case, GIFT City, and Dipesh would underwrite his own presence here also signals that the ease of doing business in GIFT City is far miles ahead of where your usual perception of the difficulties of operating in India are. The regulator is not just regulating the financial services industry, but they're also taking a lot of industry feedback and baking them into the legal principles, the rules that are getting incorporated. And accordingly, we frankly feel, again as a legal practitioner, advising a lot of intermediations that are going in GIFT City, that there is a significant ease of doing business in GIFT City. All you need is to set up a unit space. Space is available. You need to, at some point in time, onboard a professional who will sort of oversee some of the activities which are being conducted there. The entire ownership of the GIFT City unit can be overseas. The board composition also can very flexibly be set up to whatever you desire. You could use it for stock broking or broker dealer activities. You can even set up investment managers, which is where a bulk of the action today is happening. As indicated that there is so much of allocation coming to India, we currently see GIFT City being used as a fund formation jurisdiction where global LPs sort of pool their commitments. You always continue to see a use of feeder vehicles. It could be in UAE, it could be in Delaware, but ultimately GIFT City is where the master funds are getting set up. I'll take a pause here. There's obviously so much more that I could cover, but I thought those would be preferable.
Thank you, Richie. Dipesh, coming back to you, and I want to go back to a bit of a structural question rather than a detailed one, which is GIFT or the IFSCA framework a domestic solution which therefore is addressing the needs of an Indian investor or investments into India, or is it really an international solution? Your comments, please.
Thank you. I think many times we get asked about this question about what is the structure of gift. And I think the simplest way to put this is you have to think gift as an inbound and outbound gateway. So if you really want to see gift, how does it work in your strategy? If you want to invest into India, you can be part of the gift city. You bring in dollars and you bring in foreign currency and you create a structure which helps you to invest into both Indian listed, unlisted, and various startup and other strategies. If you want to invest from India outside, you can still have a fund in gift, which will receive the money from the Indian investors and invest into outbound strategies into the markets outside India. So I'll put it as a solution for both inbound and outbound, but for the international financial services. Gift is not something which can provide you solution for doing domestic business in local currency. That's where you land into domestic India. But if you or your currency of dealing or your business at one end or the other end amidst the customers, which is an international financial services transactions, you can structure them in gift. To add to what you asked, one more comparable example I can give is how the Hong Kong was probably used by China to make it as an international financial services sector. You can imagine GIFT on the similar line as to how the India is utilizing its own offshore center now to ensure that it is able to get the maximum traction in terms of the international financial services. So for example, we are close to I hope that's not the signal for me to pass on the question back, but I'm just adding to and then again give it back to Vinit to you. As we are placed, we are close to 500 plus entities in the IFFC zone, which is across verticals. It is banking, insurance, capital market, fintech, aircraft leasing, ship leasing. So you have an international financial services business, you will probably find a structure or an enabling framework available from which you can operate from. So that's how I will put it. GIFT is a both inbound and outbound gateway for international financial services.
I just want to take it forward, Dr. Bhaskar, from where Dipesh left. And it's a new term that I started coming across. We always knew about the onshore markets and the onshore framework. We then started talking about the offshore carved out zones and offshore parallel jurisdiction and judiciary capabilities and framework. There is a new term that has started coming up, which is mid-shore. And GIFT very often is told to me is a mid-shore solution and not an offshore solution. So I'm just taking forward the same point of domestic versus international, mid-shore versus offshore. What's your assessment?
If I may put it this way, the closest parallel I can think about is the role that Hong Kong plays with China. And one of the reasons why it has been so successful is because it provides you with complete access to the mainland, and it's got very strong ties, but it has got independence as well. But the thing that I think Dipesh mentioned as well is that we shouldn't look at GIFT only as an inbound center. Now with the rules and regulations that have been released, I'm sure Richie would know this much better, things like ODI, can you just imagine the outflow of liquidity from India to invest globally once the ODI regime has been properly bedded down? The amount of capital formation within India has to be seen to be believed. There is a very good reason why so many Indian funds are very happy to just do cap intro and capital raise just in domestic markets. It's mind-boggling. But then what you're seeing India is, from an economic perspective, is flipping. Previously it was capital constrained, but the smart countries realize that countries which invest abroad actually earn much more. So when you're talking about mix-shoring, we're talking about it is separate, it is also inbound, and it's also developing the mechanisms for outbound peace. So it will become a true, if you will, a mid-shore center for India.
Thank you very much. And I, of course, bring to the point of how much of the wealth creation or disposable income is being available and visible at the domestic asset management industry, right? Imagine a country with 27% savings rate moving up from $3 trillion to $5 trillion, and a fraction of that actually moves to the capital markets. So the potential is huge as you see it, and India, I agree, has been able to ward off the volatility of the capital outflows only on account of the fact that the Indian asset management industry has seen regular and month-on-month increments from Indian savers. So great. Krishna, I'll draw you once again into your experience at Alpin, because that's rich and varied. In terms of the transactions that Alpin finds itself including in the region, where do you think the capability of this region, the GCC or UAE, lie in terms of structuring the deals, concluding, kind of doing the financial closures for such deals, and do you think India, either onshore or through GIFT as a new jurisdiction, will be able to build its strength and build its capabilities on the same lines?
Sure. So, let me draw experience on the last couple of decades, when transactions typically used to be structured with PVI or Cayman or Mauritius jurisdictions. We've come a long way from there, and specifically in the UAE, for example, which has created so many free zones, we've seen those being used very selectively. But over the last few years, we've seen an increased adoption of ADGM and DIFC structures. And I think that's primarily because these jurisdictions have really been very successful in terms of providing the comfort to investors and also positioning themselves globally at par with alternatives that exist, probably even better in terms of policies, regulations, turnaround times, etc. And I think where GIFT is today, I think is where probably DIFC was, let's say, a decade ago. So I think there's between the cooperation, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And as Dr. Bhaskar said and Mr. Devesh said, this is a one-of-a-kind jurisdiction that is being created. We are now, we also have an asset management vertical, so we are seeing a lot of increased adoption of GIFT City for a lot of fund managers to structure their transactions there, and we are also now engaged with them distributing products which are all being housed out of GIFT City.
Richie, I will just take the same point forward, which Dr. Bhaskar and Dipesh talked about, where they were looking at the potential of Indian H&I, family offices, trusts, and investment corporations. Generally speaking, is going to become the new order of the day for both fund managers and asset managers to consider India more seriously, even as outbound investment. How do you think GIFT City, therefore, is fitting into the current reality that is being faced by multifunctional or multi-jurisdictional H&Ws or family offices? It is hinting towards the family office provisions that GIFT recently announced.
Sure. No, I think it's still work in progress insofar as the family office rules are concerned. One of the key aspects, which is sort of being a roadblock here, is that there is an expectation that you would grow the corpus to $10 million within 3 years of coming into existence. And there are, bandwidth limitations for an Indian resident to remit funds abroad, especially if they're an individual, then it's capped at $250,000 per financial year. So we definitely feel that there has to be some overseas, engagement on the structure for somebody who's outside India to fund a family investment office or fund in GIFT City. That could perhaps be one playbook that can operate. The other way to look at it is there could be corporates or LLPs which are set up, which are again controlled by a family who can definitely look at setting up the family office in GIFT City as a subsidiary. I think the broader playbook is going to be more about actually investment funds. We frankly feel that a lot of family offices may struggle to get allocations to preferred deals unless they have partnered through a professional fund manager outfit or franchise, who obviously would make available certain asset classes which a family office may by themselves struggle. There are actually very handful of family offices in India which have the level of sophistication required to scrutinize investment products, get invited to participate in different marquee or franchisee fund offerings which are out there. So we frankly feel that Indian family offices, again, this is coming from a practitioner's perspective with what structures we have set up for our clients over the last 5 years. We frankly feel that the intermediation is the way to go about it. It's not as if the Indian family offices lack muscle or cannot sort of work up the numbers to make sizable commitments. But the access to products sometimes get better aligned. Some of the products can be much larger ticket sizes, which is what a pooling vehicle brings to the table. We've also seen investment funds being set up where the fund is a fund of one. There is only one family which is sort of investing as the only LP in the fund. This obviously allows the investment fund to operate actually like a family office. It's just that they have an intermediation of a fund manager, which we feel is a great combination for them to enjoy the best of both worlds. The only challenge is that an investment fund is a finite tenure product. It could either be an open-end structure, which obviously does not match with all the asset classes that a family office is looking to allocate towards. And if it's a closed-end fund, then the regulator obviously expects a sunset clause on when the tenure is going to come to a close, which is where we see some amount of tension between the mismatch between the asset class and the expectations. So I think that some solutions will have to evolve. There are so many circulars which are coming out, frankly, on a monthly basis on making the family office regime be more workable. But till that comes to the table, we frankly feel a combination of an investment fund may be more suitable today.
Thank you, Richie. Dipesh, I come back to you with with this background of announcements of OPI, announcements of FIF, interpretation of ODI guidelines, while it was pretty well laid out by IFSCA, which is a unified regulator and actually was the game changer in my mind in terms of what has happened since June 2020. Where do you think IFSCA as a regulator is focusing on creating better clarity or working with the onshore regulator so that there is less friction and better interpretation of what you would like to see, whether for inbound, but definitely for outbound investment flows from Indian residents, Indian corporates, and Indian families?
Yeah, Vinit, I would say that objectives of both the domestic and the international regulator at the IFFCA, the objectives are not say coming over each other's territory. The objectives are the same when it comes to onshore India for the domestic business, for the domestic regulators. When it comes to the offshore India for the offshore transactions, it is the IFFC as a unified regulator. But we have to go one level further to understand where the transaction complications comes in. If you are an Indian entity, you are an Indian institutions, you want to send in and convert Indian rupees into dollar and send to a financial center, forget about gift, it can be any financial center or any location outside India. You have to comply with the domestic regulators, regulations in order to do those transactions, whether it is to gift or it is from outside other financial centers. What probably we work with the regulators both in the domestic and offshore, the principle of parity, which means that if something can be done from Singapore, Dubai and Mauritius for India, the similar structure should operate and be allowed and be on the same line be made operational from the gift for India. Because end of the day what we are doing, we are saying onshore the offshore financial services, which means if I can work out a structure from Singapore for India, I should be able to do the similar structure from gift to India. But when it comes to a structure which is sending in the money from India domestic market to offshore center, not only gift but even outside, it also operates on the parity principle. So if something is not working right now in my zone, in the international zone of GIFT City, which also means that it is also not working in the other finance outside India. which means there is in a way a parity. But I think where the IFMC authority or IFMC role provides an additional comfort, not only to the domestic regulators, because end of the day they are on my board. My authority consists of the board from the domestic regulators, which means they have far more visibility and the far more confidence of what is happening within the financial centers because they are also part of the same ecosystem. And two, my tax principles operates on the similar line as now what it operates in the offshore financial center. So there is no, in a way, there is no tax leakage when you are using the gift as a financial center versus using the other financial centers. I think what the investors or what the probably the hedge funds community and maybe the family investment fund community wants is a clarity. Whatever I want, I can do. It should be on a written clarity that this is what is permissible, this is what is not permissible. And I think between the IFFC and the domestic regulators, we are trying to work out on the principle of giving the clarity where we can tell the investors and tell the structures coming to the gift city that this is permissible, this is not permissible. I think as far as you can give clarity, investors and the fund structures are happy that they have clarity that this will work and this will not work. So we are at that phase of bringing in the clarity wherever the market participants comes back to us that look, while your regulation works fantastic, when I go to the domestic or when I go to the offshore, something is not working for me. Can you help me to get that clarity? So I work with the domestic regulators to bring in those clarity.
Thank you very much. The time is up for this panel. Dipesh, thank you. We missed having you in person at this conference. Dr. Bhaskar, thanks a lot. Always a pleasure to hear your views. Krishna, thank you very much. Riji, pleasure. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, give all of the panelists a big round of applause.